Hello, everybody. On behalf of General Mills and its many and varied services, a warm welcome to our Betty Crocker kitchens.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're taking a delicious trip down memory lane, back to the Canadian kitchens of the mid-20th century. We're talking about those classic Betty Crocker suppers that were a staple in so many homes, the ones that smelled of comfort and brought families together. But times change, and some of those beloved dishes have faded from our tables. So, get ready for a dose of nostalgia as we look at 20 old Betty Crocker suppers that Canadians just don't seem to make anymore. Let's dig in. Supper number 1. Tuna noodle casserole. Ah, the tuna noodle casserole, a true workhorse of the Canadian kitchen. Creamy, comforting, and oh so easy. This was a staple, often featuring canned tuna, maybe cloverleaf, a Canadian favorite, egg noodles, and that signature crunchy topping, often crushed potato chips or breadcrumbs. It was popular because it was budget-friendly, used pantry staples readily available at your local Loblaws or Safeway, and could feed a crowd. Why did it fade? Perhaps our palates became a little more adventurous, or maybe we just got tired of all that cream of mushroom soup. But for many of us, that first whiff of warm tuna noodle casserole still brings back cozy memories. Supper number 2. Beef stroganoff. Ooh, beef stroganoff! Suddenly things felt a little bit fancy, didn't they? Tender strips of beef in a rich, sour cream sauce, often served over egg noodles or rice. This one had a bit more of a European flair and felt special enough for a Sunday supper, but still manageable for a weeknight. Maybe your mom even added a dollop of that good Canadian sour cream on top. It was popular for its satisfying richness and relatively simple preparation. Why did it disappear from our regular rotation? Maybe it felt a tad heavy as our tastes shifted towards lighter fare, or perhaps the convenience of quicker meals took over. But the memory of that savory aroma is still strong. Supper number 3. Chicken pot pie. The classic chicken pot pie. Flaky, golden crust giving way to a creamy, savory filling of chicken and vegetables. This was comfort food in a dish, especially on a chilly Canadian evening. Often made with leftover chicken, it was a thrifty and delicious way to feed the family. You might have even seen those frozen versions advertised during your favorite TV shows. Why don't we make it as much? Maybe the effort of the pastry seemed daunting, or perhaps the ease of store-bought options changed the game. But that warm, comforting feeling of a homemade chicken pot pie is hard to forget. Supper number 4. Salisbury steak with mushroom gravy. Salisbury steak. Now this was a hearty meal. Ground beef patties shaped like little steaks, smothered in a rich, savory mushroom gravy, often served with mashed potatoes and maybe some frozen peas. It felt like a substantial, stick-to-your-ribs kind of supper, popular for its affordability and satisfying flavor. You could probably find all the ingredients at your local grocery store without breaking the bank. Why did it become less common? Maybe our focus shifted towards leaner meats, or perhaps the simplicity of other ground beef dishes took precedence. But that meaty aroma and the taste of that gravy are distinctly nostalgic. Supper number 5. Sloppy Joes. Oh, get your napkins ready. Sloppy Joes. That messy, tangy, sweet, and savory ground beef mixture served on a soft bun. These were a hit with kids and a quick, easy meal for busy parents. Perfect for a casual weeknight dinner, maybe with a side of crispy potato chips. You might remember seeing the Manwich brand on the shelves. Why did their popularity wane? Maybe we started looking for slightly less, sloppy options. But there's a certain fun and carefree memory attached to a good old sloppy Joe. Supper number 6. Macaroni and beef simple. Satisfying macaroni and beef. Ground beef browned with onions and then simmered with tomatoes and macaroni. This was a budget-friendly and filling meal that many Canadian families relied on. It was easy to make in a big pot and always seemed to disappear quickly. Maybe your mom added some shredded cheddar cheese on top. Why did it become less of a go-to? Perhaps our culinary horizons broadened, or maybe the simplicity became too simple. But that comforting combination of pasta, beef, and tomato is a flavor many of us remember. Supper number 7. Creamed chipped beef on toast. SOS. Okay, this one might be a bit more divisive. Creamed chipped beef on toast, often affectionately or not so affectionately known as SOS, This was made with dried beef and a creamy white sauce served over toast. It was a very budget-friendly option and a quick way to get a hot meal on the table. Perhaps it was a supper born more out of necessity than desire. Why did it fade? Well, maybe the texture wasn't everyone's favorite, or perhaps the ingredients became less common in our pantries. But for some, it holds a strange sort of nostalgic charm. Supper number 8. Tamale pie, tamale pie. Now, this was an interesting one, bringing a bit of southwestern flavor to the Canadian table. A savory cornbread topping over a chili-like meat filling. It was a fun twist on a typical casserole and offered a bit of spice. You might have seen variations of this in those old Betty Crocker cookbooks, perhaps adapted for Canadian tastes. Why did it disappear from our regular menus? Maybe the ingredients felt a little less familiar, or perhaps it was overshadowed by other casserole options. But that slightly sweet cornbread and savory filling combination is a unique memory. Supper number 9. Chicken a la king. Chicken a la king. This felt a bit more elegant, didn't it? Diced chicken in a creamy sauce with mushrooms, peppers, and sometimes pimentos, often served over toast points, rice, or biscuits. It was a way to make leftover chicken feel a bit more special. Perhaps it was a dish you might have seen in magazines or on early television cooking segments. Why did it become less popular? Maybe it felt a bit dated, or perhaps the creamy sauce seemed a bit rich for modern tastes. But there's a certain sophistication we might recall from this dish. Supper number 10. Welsh rarebit. Here's one that might sound a little unusual to some. Welsh rarebit. Essentially, fancy cheese on toast. A savory sauce made with cheese, beer, or milk and seasonings poured over toasted bread. It was a simple but comforting dish, perhaps enjoyed as a light supper or snack. Maybe your grandparents made this one. Why did it fade from popularity? Perhaps it seemed a bit too basic, or maybe our tastes for more complex flavors took over. But that warm, cheesy goodness on toast has a certain comforting simplicity. Supper number 11. Scotch broth as a main course. While Scotch broth is often a starter in some Canadian households, especially those with Scottish heritage, a hearty, thick version filled with barley, lamb, or beef and vegetables could certainly be a main course. On a cold winter's night, a big bowl of this was incredibly warming and satisfying. You might have seen your baba or grandma making a big pot of it. Why do we see it less as a main? Maybe our eating habits shifted towards quicker meals, or perhaps the time needed for a proper broth became a factor. But that rich, savory flavor and the heartiness of a good Scotch broth are deeply comforting memories for many. Supper number 12. Shepherd's pie. Now, shepherd's pie is still around, but maybe not in the exact same way as the classic Betty Crocker versions. A layer of savory ground meat, traditionally lamb, but often beef in Canada, topped with mashed potatoes, baked until golden brown. It was a fantastic way to use up leftovers and a guaranteed crowd pleaser. It's a dish that evokes images of family dinners and cozy evenings. While still popular, maybe the homemade versions have been replaced by easier options. But that perfect bite of savory meat and fluffy potato is timeless. Supper number 13. Corn fritters as a light supper. Remember corn fritters? Crispy, golden little patties of cornmeal and corn, sometimes a little sweet, sometimes savory. These might have been served as a light supper with a side salad, or maybe some maple syrup for dipping. They were a fun and slightly different way to enjoy corn, especially when fresh Canadian corn was in season. Why don't we see them as much for supper? Maybe they felt more like a side dish or snack, or perhaps the effort of frying them seemed less appealing over time. But that sweet and crispy texture is a lovely memory. Supper number 14. Liver and onions. Okay, another potentially divisive one. Liver and onions. Sliced liver sautéed with plenty of sweet caramelized onions. It was a very nutritious and affordable meal that many families relied on. Perhaps your parents or grandparents insisted on its health benefits. Why did it become less popular? Well, the taste and texture aren't for everyone, and maybe our culinary preferences moved away from organ meats. But the distinct smell of liver and onions cooking is a strong memory for those who grew up with it. Supper number 15. Creamed peas on toast. Simple, humble creamed peas on toast. Canned peas in a basic white sauce served over toast. Another very budget-friendly and quick meal, often relied upon for a fast weeknight supper. It was perhaps more about practicality than gourmet flavor. Why did it fade? Maybe it felt a bit too basic as our access to a wider variety of ingredients increased. But that mild, creamy flavor and soft texture might still bring back memories of very simple times. Supper number 16. Chicken noodle soup as a main. While chicken noodle soup is still a comfort food staple, remember when a really hearty homemade version packed with chicken and noodles could be the main event? Served with crusty bread, it was a nourishing and satisfying meal, especially when someone in the family was feeling under the weather. Every Canadian family probably had their own version. Why do we see it less as a primary supper? Maybe our busy lives led to quicker soup options, or perhaps it transitioned more firmly into the sick day meal category. But that warm, comforting broth is a universal Canadian memory. Supper number 17. Mock chicken legs. Mock chicken legs. These were an interesting creation. Seasoned ground meat shaped around skewers and then baked or fried, sometimes breaded to resemble actual chicken legs. It was a slightly more fun and appealing way to serve ground meat to kids. You might have found recipes for these in those creative Betty Crocker pages. Why did they disappear? Maybe they were a bit too labor-intensive compared to other ground meat dishes, or perhaps they simply fell out of fashion. But the novelty of eating a mock chicken leg is a quirky memory. Supper number 18. Tomato soup with grilled cheese. Okay, this one is a timeless classic, but remember when a really good thick tomato soup, maybe even homemade or doctored up from a can with some milk or cream, paired with a perfectly grilled cheese sandwich was a quintessential supper? Simple, satisfying, and always a hit. It's a combination that evokes rainy days and comforting warmth. While still popular, maybe the focus has shifted towards more elaborate soups and sandwiches. But that tangy tomato and melty cheese combo is pure comfort. Supper number 19. Jell-O salad as part of supper. Now, this might raise a few eyebrows. Remember when a sweet and jiggly Jell-O salad, often containing fruit, vegetables, yes, really, and sometimes even mayonnaise or cream cheese, was a common accompaniment to supper? These colorful creations were a staple at potlucks and family gatherings and often made their way onto the dinner table. Why did they become less of a supper side? Perhaps our tastes shifted away from the sweet and savory combinations, or maybe the focus on healthier options changed things. But those wobbly, colorful Jell-O salads are definitely a unique memory of Canadian suppers. Supper number 20. Something simple on toast. Finally, let's not forget those really simple suppers on toast. Maybe it was just buttered toast, or perhaps beans on toast, or even just cheese melted on toast. These were the ultimate quick and easy meals, often on nights when time or energy was short. They might not have been fancy, but they filled a need. Why did these fade? Maybe our expectations for supper evolved, or perhaps the availability of more convenient options changed things. But sometimes the simplest things are the most memorable. So there you have it, 20 old Betty Crocker suppers that you might not see on Canadian dinner tables as much anymore. Which ones did you remember? Did any of these bring back a specific memory of your own kitchen or family? Let me know in the comments below. It's funny how food can be such a powerful time machine, isn't it? These dishes might seem simple now, but they were part of the fabric of Canadian family life for so many years. They represent a time when supper was a shared event, a moment of connection. Thanks for taking this nostalgic trip with me. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more trips down memory lane. Until next time, take care and happy reminiscing.